There was a group of people that have just a very visceral negative reaction to Elon and his involvement in a company that essentially acts as a utility in a lot of ways. There's reason to be overly paranoid about like what's going on with this service. That said, it was one of those things. It almost reminds me of like when Will Smith slapped Chris Rock and that like initial 30 minutes after, no one exactly knew how to react. And everyone was kind of paralyzed for like, oh my gosh, well, did Chris Rock cross a line and Will Smith just hit someone on stage? Like that's assault. And everyone's brains like were kind of malfunctioning. And it felt like in a similar way, this Elon Musk thing, you saw people's like, I know I'm supposed to have an opinion here, but I'm not actually sure what that opinion is. And so I'm going to claim these outlandish things about what the implications for this are, when in truth, how much is this actually going to change anything? I'm not really sure.
I think a lot of people are missing that he's probably not the best at social. He hasn't done like consumer internet product development since his days at Zip2 and PayPal. And that was like 20 years ago. And the things that he talks about are things that actually probably won't affect the business that much. Like his most recent grievance was about censorship, but the average Twitter user has never had their tweet censored. How does that have any material impact to the business? Certainly, it's like a virtue, but I don't see how that's like meaningful. And so I think my prediction is that he will try to ham-fist like a lot of product decisions that don't necessarily make sense or help Twitter's business. But I am a Twitter shareholder. I own quite a bit. And I think despite his influence having a net negative probably on the business, the cult around Elon will likely turn Twitter like into a meme stock, at least in the short term. And I think like every news story that comes out where it's like, oh, Elon influenced this or that will probably cause the stock to rally. Here's a very talented operator, someone who uses the product. I didn't know there was this like anti-Elon segment on the internet. I would think that most woke people would like Elon because he's in like how he's impacted the environment. But I think the billionaire status just upsets them way too much. Like he made way too much money saving the world.
And there's anti-union stuff, and there's been accusations of like racism within the company. And obviously he's compared people to Hitler on the platform, and he called the guy a pedophile. And so
no one's perfect, okay?
Yeah.
Like he without sin cast the first stone, Logan.
Yeah. Who among us hasn't called like someone trying to save kids in a cave a pedophile, right? Like that's where I fall on this. But no, I know there's an anti-Elon sentiment. And so it didn't totally surprise me that was going to be the reaction. But it's interesting that like all these people were just clamoring for, oh my gosh, I'm leaving the platform they sent to Twitter. And then an hour later, they keep tweeting about how angry they are on Twitter. And it's just, no one's going to do anything. If you're addicted to Twitter, you're going to stay on it. If Elon's going to shove a stick in the eye a little bit and poke and prod to move things along, I think that's a great thing. And I don't know, his calibration on a lot of these things or his product intuition is not going to be perfect, but at least there's going to be like a vocal advocate trying to push change to a product that hasn't had much in the last 15 years.
Yeah, I'm quitting Twitter is the I'm moving to Canada of reactions, right? Everyone quits Twitter and comes back 2 seconds later. No one's moving to Canada no matter who wins the election. That's like a well-known fact. And so ultimately, it's a little bit, I don't know, it just feels completely disingenuous for people to use Twitter to complain about all of the problems they feel like are with Twitter's management.
I think, one of the all-time quotes was Zuckerberg's quote about Twitter, which was, Twitter is such a mess. It's like they drove a clown car into a gold mine and fell in. Nikita, like, what do you think makes Twitter actually special from a product standpoint as the person that's actually built social apps? And then two, like, what are the issues that they face, or where do they need to go from here with Elon's involvement, with the groundwork that Jack's left over the last 6 years? Like, where do they need to head?
I think Twitter has evolved a lot over the years. Initially, it was about sharing like mundane facts about your day. And I think the concept of a status was still being developed. And the worst description I think of Twitter was early on when they called it microblogging, which I don't think it is. I think the better way to describe it is like a global chat room. It has many similar feelings to like the early days of IRC and AOL, where you have this very online crowd just chatting. But the innovation, I think, was that chat rooms are like a pretty bad hierarchy of information and form factor. And the way that Twitter has structured the content with a following model makes it so that anything you say has the ideal amount of reach and interaction. So that's how I associate it in my mind. But it's a really challenging product to build because it operates on an interest graph, not a friend graph. And there's no way to import that.
I think your point on the interest graph, it's a really good one, where Facebook you're associating with people that you know, Twitter you're associating with interests. And TikTok's been the one that's gotten this really right, in that like the cold start problem, you go in and you just start optimizing like, oh, I like this, I don't like that. Oh, and they build that information graph for you of, hey, here's the interests, right? Now it's kind of scary that we don't know what they're actually doing, and it's a Chinese, company. And so we can talk about why that's scary, but the cold start problem there is like solved for you. And so the time to value is super quick, right? You like get on there and it just starts feeding you interesting information, and you're not shown the entirety of what people are interested in, right? Or what people are communicating. You're shown a subset that maybe each video sits on its own, versus Twitter. Like if I want to tweet about Tennessee football and I want to tweet about tech, like you're getting force fed both of those things. And it's like, it's based on me as a person, not you and your interests, right? And I think that fundamental problem, it's kind of a machine learning problem that clearly TikTok solved, and you can tell Twitter's working on it in a meaningful way. But it does lead to, I was looking at the stats, there's been 1.3 billion accounts created on Twitter, and 44% of those made an account and never sent a tweet. Right. And that's just kind of a cold start problem. Now it's roughly flat. But just to put this in context, their stock price today is the exact same as when it started trading when they went public in 2013. We're talking like one of the biggest internet boom markets. The revenue's gone up by 8x over that period of time, and their stock price has stayed flat. They've gone from 40 times revenue to 5 times revenue, which should maybe serve as a little bit of a warning to some of these like, businesses that are raised at big prices, right? To some extent, like they're kind of a victim of how much hype they had originally, because the business, while a clown car that fell into a gold mine, has grown. It's 8x bigger than it was, right? And so while they've missed a lot of opportunities along the way, all but 1 year, revenue and user growth kept going up. And so all these things are like about the missed opportunity and about the expectations we all had from it, more than just like pure dumpster fire execution, which I think, is a lesson that operators can kind of take today about valuations and expectations and all that stuff.
I don't know if you guys remember, but like in 2013, there was a app called Color that raised 50 million from Sequoia and Bain. They ended up just flopping and shutting down, and all the engineers just were acqui-hired into Apple. And I think there's probably many ways to run a company. One is to have that kind of we're changing the world approach before you have. And sometimes it helps with recruiting. Sometimes it just is a net negative. Me personally, I just like operating in the shadows until finding product market fit and then being public about what I'm working on. Having said that, his personality seems to have rubbed people the wrong way. And because of that, there were just countless tweets from big tech PMs and classic thread posters lambasting the CEO Dom for all kinds of things. But for the most part, these were types of people who had never built something in their lives. They were railing on him for raising too much money. You're supposed to raise money, especially a good valuation. That's the job of a CEO, is to get a great valuation and minimize dilution. He got criticized for hiring contractors in Nigeria. That's part of 0 to 1 product development. Before you have funding, you hire contractors to get some prototype out because it's cheaper. Maybe you want to let them know when you're terminating them. And I think that was where some criticism emerged. But at the end of the day, contractors are temporary workers. So that's just what they sign up for. And then was he spending too much? Who knows? There certainly are some decisions that might look dumb in retrospect, but everything looks dumb in retrospect when a product fails. You could go through some of them, like he paid the chain smokers $1 million to perform, but this was also during the highest moment of employee churn in Silicon Valley. We literally called it the Great Resignation. Maybe that was a way to retain employees, and losing a senior engineer often does cost more than $1 million. So maybe it made them a tighter team. I don't think we really know around the intent of a lot of the decisions that he made.
There's also a distinction to be drawn between a character that happened to be the founder and CEO that you find annoying and maybe has shady dealings in the past, and 500 employees that are going to be out of their job. And like, let's be clear, if you're making a joke about fast, like that's not dumb. That is 500 people that are now unemployed. And like, that's just not fucking cool. And if you're a VC doing it, it's pretty fucking gross. It's like our job is predicated on people taking risks and joining companies. And like, what are you doing? Like, criticize Dom, say whatever. He spent too much and he was too showy and too opulent. And by the way, Chainsmokers getting paid $1 million to do private gigs. Like, I had no idea they were getting that type of fee. But like doing all this stuff, but not separating that from the 500 employees that lost their job. That's kind of where it's like, guys, what are we talking about here?